Hi, everyone. My name is Lindsay Dahl, and I'm the Chief Impact Officer at Ritual, and I'm also the author and activist behind the book Cleaning House. And I'm here to chat about whether you identify as someone as part of the MAHA movement or you've been a lifelong vegan, who is welcome in the environmental movement today. One of the things that Julie and I talked about, and one of the reasons I love Planet House is because really everyone is welcome in the house. So if you think about the intersection between the environment and our health, I don't really care how you come into the conversation. Maybe you first come into the conversation because you learned about toxic chemicals in consumer products and you learned about toxic chemicals in your home, and that helped bridge you to the environment and environmental pollution outside the four walls of your home, that's totally acceptable to me. And there's a lot of people within the environmental community that are so dogmatic in their push for anti consumption that it may be dismissed. But one of the things I love about Planet House and where Julia's leadership really comes in is to say, look, everyone is welcome in this community. We have to be a big tent coalition, including people along all parts of the political spectrum and all different lifestyles if we're really going to create the change we need to create a healthier home and a healthier planet. One of the things I talk about in my book, Cleaning House, the fight to rid our home of toxic chemicals, is just how polarized everything has become. So I watched 5 years ago in the middle of COVID how social media really started to create these different factions and rifts and fissures within the environmental community. And that certainly is true for the environmental health community. So, looking at how toxic chemical pollution really shows up in our drinking water and our food and our consumer choices. And, I wrote a book about toxic chemical pollution, but one of the things I talk about the most is the most toxic thing in our homes is actually social media. So I encourage people to actually reduce the amount of time we spend on social media because the algorithms are designed to push us into these two different worlds. And the kind of polarization that we're seeing both across our democracy, but even around issues that have historically enjoyed a lot of bipartisan support. Like protecting the environment, is really a byproduct of these toxic social media algorithms. So, I think one of the best things we can do today is to actually put away our phones, get our sources of information from credible news organizations and organizations working on the front lines of these issues. And thereby, you know that you're getting higher quality content and it's going to avoid kind of putting us in this us versus them position, which is not serving anyone in the environmental community. And it's certainly not doing any favors for Mother Earth.
I've heard a theme on this stage at Planet House around packaging quite a bit. In your sustainability work at Ritual, is packaging a part of that focus?
Yeah, absolutely. So we not only think about the sustainability of the ingredients that we're sourcing, but also the packaging that it delivers itself to the consumer in. And, I think one of the things, packaging is one of the most complicated sustainability challenges for a company to tackle. And I always ask people to prioritize what is it that you're trying to solve for. So at Ritual, for example, one of the things we're trying to solve for is reducing the amount of plastic that is going into the landfill. And so, for that reason, and based on the kind of products that we bring to market, we push to use as much recycled content, plastic content in our packaging as possible. Now, if someone was really focusing on a different priority, like avoiding plastic entirely, that would push them towards different packaging choices. The other thing that's a huge priority and one of the kind of North Stars for us at Ritual is the amount of carbon that we're putting out into the world, knowing that climate change is one of the biggest threats to our entire collective society. So, for example, when we did a life cycle assessment of if we switched to glass versus using 100% recycled PET bottles, we found that there's 59% more carbon used if we were to source glass and then ship in glass. And so, again, for a lot of people that are like, oh, but isn't aren't these packaging problems easy to solve? The answer is no, because if you want to avoid plastic entirely, you're going to have a pretty high carbon impact trade off, which is hard. So we basically try to look at all of the different sources and take all these complex things and use scientific tools like life cycle assessments to help us answer those questions.
So, just in our discussion today, I've heard kind of a theme, which is that you don't have to go radical and eliminate and then pick something X. You can actually improve the world with continuous improvement by trying to minimize and then study and understand rather than wholesale getting rid of the plastic and replacing it with glass.
Yeah, and it's hard to be a perfectionist in the world today because you can't have a house that has zero plastic in it. You can't entirely shop your way to safety and avoid toxic chemicals altogether. So I think dogmatic thinking is actually something that really hinders the environmental community, and it's something that I'm encouraging people to try to strip themselves of, and that includes the kind of dogmatic thinking we see around our politics. And so, if we can kind of collectively come together and ask really hard questions, the companies we buy from and those we elect into office, I think we're going to get to solutions much faster than holding people to everyone else's kind of line of perfectionism, which for everyone looks a little bit different.
In terms of being able to more widely educate people, if you were a very young person starting out today, would you go to college and study climate impacts and the climate itself, or would you pick some other field of study that you could then apply to climate and climate change?
Good question. So, during my undergrad, I did study environmental science, and I think I would do the same because I think it gave me a really good foundation of understanding how everything is interconnected and kind of the kind of beautiful ecosystems that sustain life on Earth. So I think if I were in college today, I would study environmental science and sustainability because I think it gave me the foundation to be able to apply it in a lot of different paths. So, I've been an activist working for the public health and environmental nonprofit community, and I've worked within the walls of four walls of incredible companies, including Ritual. And so, I think um, I wouldn't go like the MBA business route because I feel like that you can learn on the job. What's really hard to know and appreciate, and I think deserves our time and attention is really understanding just how complex our ecosystems are. We've talked a lot about, and what I love about the work at Planet Forward and Planet House is that at Ritual, our focus is really around um, using ingredient traceability as a way to solve many of the big sustainability issues within our supply chain. So, a lot of people think things like supply chain traceability feels boring or unsexy, but we actually see it as the keys to the kingdom. It's our way to be able to understand, for example, if we're using an ingredient for a women's health supplement. I'll take an example. People like to use collagen for creating products and supplements that help people's skin. But if you actually look and you source where that collagen comes from, it's actually highly unsustainable. Typically, is contributing to deforestation, especially in the rainforest, and it's also contributing to displacing indigenous communities in South America. So instead of just going after the buzzy ingredient, we thought, how can we actually solve the problem of healthier skin through the lens of a women's health supplement, but really focus on ingredients and suppliers within those ingredient supply chains that are going to let us see everything and open up the doors so we can kind of really look at how that ingredient really comes to our product. And in doing so, we have been able to solve and create a really great skin health supplement. But instead of using things like collagen, we're actually using vegan ingredients that come from traceable farms from the south of France. And so I think that kind of ingredient story, which makes sense for our food, hasn't always been translated to consumer products, whether it's beauty or supplements or other kind of different CPG categories. But I really would encourage companies, and especially people like myself working for companies, to push for ingredient traceability because it's really the only way that you can have assurance around the safety and sustainability of your raw materials.
Lindsay, thank you so much for taking the time to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me and just keep up the good work.